sit down with you for a few minutes. I love long-form podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Are we rolling? We're rolling?
Could you clap the hands?
Sure, I can. Is that good?
Yeah.
Ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. We're live. Well, thank you so much, Robert, for taking a minute out of your busy schedule to sit down with me.
Yes.
It was very interesting to see you and Mr. Liu this morning. The journalists were so excited to see you both.
Yes, he and I have known each other since 2007, my first trip to Chengdu. And that was before the three-body problem had been translated into English, and he became this international superstar. Mm-hmm. But yes, it's a pleasure to be reunited with an old friend.
That's wonderful. You're quite a friendly guy, I think. I've seen you, I know that from just this interaction today. I listened to one of your interviews where you referred to William Gibson as an old friend of yours too, and a great quote of his, it was your IdeaCon, and you mentioned the job of a science fiction writer was to weigh the pros and cons.
Yes, that's right.
And not always be so positive, because the technologist will be glowing, but the science fiction writer has to be a realist.
That's right, exactly. I like to think that nobody else in the economic landscape fills our job. Those who work at universities doing pure research can't speculate about the long-term effects of their research. For instance, I once spoke to a fellow off camera. I did some documentary work, who was working on making super intelligent mice. And when I asked him off camera, what's the applicability of that to human research? He said, well, we're hoping to increase the potential of the human mind and also be able to deal with Alzheimer's and dementia. And once the camera was rolling, he said, there's no applicability. Because he knew as soon as he said any of that publicly, his funding would dry up. So the science fiction writer is the WikiLeaks of science. Mm-hmm. We know what's going on and we get it out to the public because the scientists themselves cannot do that. Yeah. And then absolutely our job is to consider not just the first order effects, but the second, third, and fourth order effects. Mm-hmm. We can famously say that, starting around, let's say, 1850, anybody could have predicted the airplane. Mm-hmm. But only a science fiction writer would have predicted airport lounges and frequent flyer miles, and airplane hijackings and things like that. Our job is to think down the road what all the good and bad ramifications of a technology might be.
Who do you think is the most influential science fiction writer of the last century then? Like, do you think
Robert J. Sawyer, without question. No. Influential.
You've had some really interesting ideas.
Well, I have. But Bill Gibson has been way more influential than I have. Neil Stephenson, likewise.
Yeah, big fan of both of them too.
Both of whom Bill I've known for a number of years, because he's a fellow Canadian. And Neil, I've had the pleasure of meeting several times. He beat me once for a Hugo, so he's not getting a Christmas card, but I think he's a very fine writer. Certainly the cyberpunks, those two, and Bruce Sterling, had a huge real-world impact. Now, what's ironic is that the real world of computing turned out to be nothing like what they were talking about. It ended up not being a subculture of hackers who was controlling everything, but the whole world participating in creating Wikipedia and all the social media sites. So they were impactful, but not prescient.
Yeah. Do you think is there a lineage? Like, if you go back before those, would it be Asimov? Back before him, would it be Čapek?
So, Čapek, of course, it was actually Čapek's brother who coined the word robota, robot. Then Čapek just used it. Right. I don't know that I think of Asimov as particularly prophetic. I think that Arthur C. Clarke was much more interested in the near future than Asimov was. Asimov's most famous works, obviously, The Foundation, far, far future.
Which is getting a whole new life now. With
it is, with David Goyer, who is the showrunner on Foundation, was also the showrunner on Flash Forward, the TV series based on my novel. So I wish Dave all the best, and of course the Asimov estate all the best with that. But Clarke, you look at 2001, A Space Odyssey, and very interestingly, MIT Press did a book in 1992 called Hal's Legacy. In the movie, Hal says his birthday. I was born on the 12th of January, 1992. at the HAL lab in Urbana, Illinois. And so MIT Press did a book asking every major AI researcher from Marvin Minsky forward how much they were influenced by HAL. And every one of them said that that was the template for what really became artificial intelligence research. Because HAL did natural language processing. He didn't sound like a machine. He could carry on a realistic conversation. He could beat a human being at chess, which was the ultimate challenge, we thought, of machine intelligence. He could express feelings and emotions. And Dave Bowman says in the movie as to whether he really feels these things, nobody can really say. But the voice recognition, the voice activation, all of this, that became the template for what really happened in artificial intelligence research came out of Arthur C. Clarke's imagination.
Many futurists these days think some people say we're around the corner. Within 12 months, we'll have AGI, like general intelligence, and maybe a day later, we'll have super intelligence.
Right.
Do you really think is that close?
We are either that close or we are nowhere near, and nobody knows for sure whether the things that we're doing right now, because really what we have to fear is not sophisticated algorithms. We should understand them, and there certainly should, as the European Union has been demanding, be auditable. They should be auditable, where you should say, you got turned down for a bank loan. You should be able to say, how come? And the algorithm should be able to point out why, not just say, my algorithmic gut says you're a bad risk.
Yeah, more transparent. That's
right, it has to be, and this is a huge challenge because most algorithms, most machine learning is not, you can't trace back the path.
It's a black box. They say
it's a black box, that's right.
Yeah.
But whether that is anywhere near leading towards intelligence, sentience, awareness, consciousness, it either is, in which case we're screwed, or it isn't, in which case we're going to be okay.
Are we screwed?
We're screwed because of what you said. When the singularity happens, when we cease to be the most intelligent beings on the planet, the singularity is essentially the moment where machine intelligence surpasses human intelligence. Okay. And then, as you said, and then the next day,
the generation will just...
The generation isn't, in a human generation, maybe 20 years is what we use as a rule of thumb for how long a human generation is. An AI generation, maybe 20 minutes.
Right.
And so we would go through, an enormous exponential expansion. Whether it will be for good or for ill, I don't know.
What does your gut tell you? Are we going to have a wonderful, transparent sort of, not communist, but like utopian anarchist government that everyone gets a job assigned to them and there's no corruption, and if they don't have a job, it's UBI? Or is it going to be paperclips? We're all paperclips.
Well, this is, again, what is my gut? My gut is that we, Homo sapiens, are nasty.
Yeah. And
we're nasty because we are the end product of 3.8 billion years of biological evolution on this planet. The planet's 4 billion years old, but life is 3.8 billion years old. And that evolution has all been driven by one engine, survival of the fittest, which really is survival of the nastiest. If I can take all the food so that my children live and your children starve, I am by definition evolutionarily fit, and you are evolutionarily unfit. Everything about evolution is based on an ecology and an economy of scarcity, and that you have to compete for limited resources, and the goal is for your children to live and the other children to die. That is how you succeed evolutionarily. Your genes are the ones that survive. It's nasty. But let me just finish my point. AI did not evolve.
Right.
AI was created.
Yeah.
AI did not come about through natural selection. AI has never experienced an economy of scarcity, but rather an economy of abundance. So AI may not be nastily competitive in the way that we are. AI may in fact be benign and cooperative and want the best for everybody.
We have that hope, right?
We have that hope. But my job as a science fiction writer, as you were alluding to earlier, is to tell both sides.
Yeah.
Because if we just are Pollyannish and say it's going to all work out just fine, we will be totally unprepared for the downside. You mentioned Asimov and his contribution, for good or for ill, the thing he's most famous for in AI search is Asimov's laws of robotics. which aren't even his laws. They were his editors, John W. Campbell Jr., put those into words. He said, and Asimov told me this directly in person. He said, I didn't come up with those. Campbell said, no, these are what's implicit in your stories. A robot may not injure a human being, blah, 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 blah. And he put them into a form, and Asimov adopted them and published them.
Those have been quite influential.
They've been quite influential, but you know what? I hate them, and here's why I hate them. It sounds completely logical. A robot may not injure a human being or through an action allow a human being to come to harm.
Yeah, sure.
A robot must obey all orders given to it by a human being, except where such orders would conflict with the first law.
Right.
And a robot must protect its own existence, except where such order was conflict with the first or second law.
Sure.
Now just change a couple of words. A slave must not injure a white man, or through an action allow a white man to come to harm.
So I think there's that dark
A
implication,
slave must obey all orders given to it by a white man, except where those orders would conflict with the first law. And a slave, realizing that it is the white man's valuable property, must protect its own existence, except where that protection would conflict with the first or second laws. It is a plantation owner's credo, and it is in no way a collaborative coexistence symbiosis between humanity and machines. It is in fact a human supremacist approach, which absolutely is one-sided and will of course be rejected by the other side, quite rightly rejected by the other side.
So it's a nice wish that will never really land.
Nobody is programming Asimov's laws in robotics into the drones that are fighting wars right now. Nobody is programming them into anything. We don't even know how to program those laws. I mean, you know, Asimov, the meat of his stories was the fact that even though those laws sound so common sense, they're so ambiguous. Do I hurt you, as my favorite of the Asimov stories, Liar? Do I hurt you by telling you the truth about your romantic potential with somebody, or do I hurt you by not telling you a comforting lie? What's the right choice?
It's too ambiguous. It's a bit like the genie too then, right? Because it's like the wording will get you. You're damn, the devil's in the details, right?
That's right.
Did you hear some story, I don't know if it's an urban legend, I think it was true, about some kind of like a drone testing military program where the drone had the goal of picking out targets, but the human had to okay them. But the drone had a competitive nature where it wanted more points.
Yes.
And eventually it just took out the human operator who was saying, don't shoot everyone down.
That's right.
Well, I got to get rid of you. You're keeping my score.
Yes, we have the phrase for that in artificial intelligence research is perverse instantiation. We think we know what we're asking it for it to do, and it finds an interpretation that we never intended, a perverse interpretation, and it's instantiated into that robot or that computer. And it is very dangerous. We share so much commonality as human beings, whether we're Chinese, North American, European, we all have so much in common that we can communicate in a shorthand. You know, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, you say that to a robot, and the robot would have a completely different interpretation of what it wants done. You know, it's okay, oil me constantly. Don't feed me, come on.
Make sure give you 220 volts continuously.
That's right, you know. So we have a really hard time putting our ethics into declarative statements that are universally true. Immanuel Kant, you know, is famous for what he called the categorical imperative, which is a fancy way of saying, should this always be a rule? And if it shouldn't always be a rule, then it's not a good rule.
Fair enough.
Right? So, you know, I happen to be a complete opponent of capital punishment. So I would say the state should never do that which the state finds abhorrent. If the state believes murder is abhorrent, the state should never commit murder. That's my position. But there are those who would say, well, you know, kind of ridiculous that a guy who's killed 18 children gets to live on the state's largesse, fed 3 square meals a day, and all the health care he needs until he dies a natural death. So even on those very straightforward issues, we have no commonality or no consensus of what the moral answer
Well, it's
is.
the same thing. I think the trolley problems brought a whole
The
new
trolley
life
problem
when
is
people were
fabulous.
trying to figure out
Yes.
AI
That's
ethics,
right. Philippa Foot is the British ethicist who first put forward the trolley problem.
Yeah.
And absolutely, it's mind-boggling, right?
I heard different countries have different ethics. They polled. And they
Yes,
said,
they
like,
do.
what would
That's
you like
right.
to do? The French are romantic. They
Yeah.
say protect women and children always.
Yes,
If it's a
that's
woman
right.
driving with children, run into the people. If you can't
That's right.
save them, if it's women and children on the road, take
Yes.
the men in the car off the bridge.
Yes, that's right.
And German says just don't interfere. Just
Yes.
hit the brakes, whatever happens.
Yes.
But it's interesting, right? Do you trust, have you ever been in a self-driving car? Would you trust the technology?
So I would trust it on a closed route as an interesting experience. And yes, I think I have, you ask have I ever been in a self-driving car? No. Have I ever been in an automobile accident? Several.
Okay.
And all of them were the fault of other people. And so, yeah, will people die because of self-driving cars? Absolutely. But will as many people die because of self-driving
Hopefully
cars
a lot
as drive
less.
now because of drunk drivers, tired drivers, or simply incompetent drivers,
Yeah.
or just random fact that cars are going to hit each other no matter the best efforts of both drivers.
Yeah. I think, China's actually quite advanced with
They
self-driving
are.
car technology. I've had the chance to drive in a couple of them. My wife thinks it's quite freaky.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting, and I imagine with like Bluetooth, the idea that what would have been a fatal accident could have two signals just going like, hey, I'm coming around the corner.
That's
and they
right.
just kind of
they have
slow
a
down
dialogue.
and-
That's what
and
we don't do.
That's what we don't do.
We
yeah.
only do a few rude hand gestures as communication
Right.
with the other drivers, right? But absolutely, when the car is in communication with all the other cars, the likelihood of an accident is humongously reduced.
Yeah.
And but then you mentioned the trolley problem. Does the car, when the car is going along and suddenly a kid runs out in front, and so the only choice is hit the kid or turn the car into the brick wall and kill the driver, nobody is ever going to buy the car that says, I'm going to choose to kill the driver, the passenger. It's not driver, passenger.
Sure.
And yet, all of our ethics say, well, that kid, then, we don't want to kill the kid. The women and children first.
So the obvious solution would be then you got to put a Bluetooth chip in the kid.
Well, that's, certainly you have to do stuff like that. Absolutely, you have to make
Chip
sure.
the kids.
We chip our dogs.
Yeah.
Right? We chip our pets. And, it's ironic that we, don't make our pets suffer through old debilitating illness. We give them a decent, euthanized passing, as they say, over the rainbow bridge for a dog.
Yeah.
And then we sit there. I remember quite vividly, I was the one who pulled the breathing tube out of my mother's mouth when she was ready to go. And not quite her last words, but the thing she said after the breathing tube came out was, now we wait for me to die. Right? Because there was, now in Canada, we do have medical assistance in dying.
MAID, I think it's
But
called,
that's right. But when she was passing, it was in fact the year before.
Right.
The legislation had been written, but it hadn't come into effect yet.
Yeah.
And so she just had to wait to basically die of being unable to breathe.
I just recently reread Mindscan.
Oh,
I
yes,
thought that
my
would be
novel
fun to
Mindscan.
talk about. And I wondered sometimes how much of the dialogue of Jake Sullivan was your own thoughts when you were a little younger. It was 2007, was it? It was almost
The
20
book
years
came out
ago?
in 2007, which
So-
means I wrote it in 2005.
Okay, yeah. You manage about a book a year?
I did for a long time. Now I take 2-3 years to write a book.
Quite inspirational for me. I feel like our time might be running a little bit short. I want to turn to a couple quick things, if you don't mind.
Yes.
We talked about the benefits of AI and self-driving cars, and it's employing in China and that kind of stuff. What about some of the drawbacks then? What did you think about the writer's strike?
Well, I was on strike. I'm a member of the Writers Guild of America.
Yeah.
And we had to go on strike.
Is the fear, like Mr. Liu said, like at one point he made this comment this morning, like, I'm not sure how much time I have left before computers write all the new science
Right,
fiction.
absolutely.
Is that a real thing
Yes,
that you guys are thinking
absolutely.
about?
Absolutely. Especially because in Hollywood, where the Writers Guild of America's jurisdiction, so much of what they do is based on existing franchises. Barbie, the big hit summer film.
Yeah.
Oppenheimer.
I cried a tear. Both of those were wonderful movies.
But Oppenheimer is based on the
course.
the nonfiction book American Prometheus by Kai Bird and Marty Sherwin, and Barbie is obviously based on the Telltoys. All of the superhero franchises. It's so easy to say, here we have done I don't know how many films now, 35 in the Marvel universe, 20 or so in the Star Wars universe. We want more of the same. And certainly it's going to come out better than, say, The Phantom Menace, which was human writers, right?
Okay. My experience, though, has been mixed with it, Give it a premise.
It's mixed now,
it's
but
so mediocre,
Right now.
Yeah.
But you were the one who said we're 12 months away,
tomorrow,
and then tomorrow. So, the Writers Guild was going on strike to try and preserve a profession for 20, 30, 40 years down the road, even though they only got a 3-year contract with the Association of Motion Picture and Television Producers. But we're worried about, of course, nobody's going to use AI to write this current season of any TV show. But 5 years from now, will they be using it instead of human writers? And isn't that a fundamental loss of human dignity? You talked about universal basic income. What is it that we all say in the dream? And then everybody can be a poet or a songwriter or a novelist or paint. We're giving away those things.
The best jobs to robots. We're going to toil in the factory.
And we're keeping the crappy jobs, right? The toilet cleaners have jobs, and the poets and writers don't. And that's not the vision we ever had for
We want Star Trek, not Mad Max.
Exactly right. I'm a Star Trek guy.
Wonderful. What about maybe a minute about China? What do you think about being back here? How do you feel? You talked this morning about how you admire the progress of China's forward-thinking science fiction kind of
Absolutely. China has done in my lifetime, so in 60 years, and even in the last 40 years, what the West took 200 years to do in terms of technological advancement, industrial revolution, shifting from being a primarily rural population to a primarily urban population. They've done all this so much more quickly.
So rapid.
And hopefully, because we made so many mistakes, that they could learn from the mistakes of those that went before. Unfortunately, in some areas like carbon emission and so forth, I don't think they did learn. If we had it to do over, we would not have done an oil and gas economy. If we had it to do over, instead of thinking, the 1960s film The Graduate, where Dustin Hoffman's character gets one word of advice for where the future is: plastics. Plastics is going to be remembered as the single worst invention besides the atomic bomb of the 20th century, because they're going to be around in the 30th century. They don't biodegrade. They're, they're
thousands of years, right?
Thousands of years.
I always feel like that's a thing, and that's one thing I have living in China now these years. I have this hope because China is, in one sense, it's been the factory of the world. I think people forget that sometimes when they mention the huge emissions. Like if you build everything that Canada or US makes, we should give them a bit of slack.
Absolutely, that's absolutely
But the other
true.
thing too is that China has enough. They have more solar power generators than all of Europe right now too, and that's still much smaller than the coal and the gas. But it is growing quickly, so it feels like it's like a tipping point in a dichotomy, maybe where you've got like so much of the coal, but so much of the solar, and of course we want to move towards the clean energy. But I also feel like maybe China somehow is able to move on a dime sometimes.
Absolutely. When I was first here in
lobbyists
2007, they still they had smoking in restaurants still. And then the premier and the party simply said, we no longer have smoking in public places. You look at the hodgepodge of individual municipal regulations that it took to over a period of decades, and still places like Las Vegas where they haven't eliminated smoking in casinos and so forth. It took forever. And, to do that, and a single unified government can accomplish things that 100 or 1,000 municipalities can't. I'm not necessarily in favor of that government model, but when it works, it certainly is efficient.
So what do you think about the convention so far? How was your day today? What
This
do you got
is
tomorrow?
the best World Science Fiction Convention ever. It's the most elaborate, most widely promoted. The venue is the most sophisticated. I've been to World Science.
See it right there, isn't it?
Right there. I've been to World Science Fiction conventions that are sleepy, small affairs. This will be remembered as, it's the 81st, but as the biggest and I think most elaborate and best World Science Fiction Convention.
It's great to be here.
And I have to go get ready for the opening ceremonies of that very
Thank you so
convention.
much for taking the time with me.
Absolutely.
I hope we get to do this again one
Absolutely.
day. Can you tell me one more thing?
Yes.
If you're able to, and if not, it's okay, it might be top secret. What are you working on right now? Is there a new Robert J. Sawyer coming up.
Thursday of next week, my new novel drops first on Audible worldwide for 6 months. It's called The Downloaded.
Okay.
And on Thursday the 26th, worldwide, it will be available in the Audible catalog.
We'll have this video by then.
And then it's 6 months down the road, it'll be out as a print book and an ebook.
Oh, that's wonderful.
All right.
Thank you so much,
My
Robert.
pleasure.
Take care.
My pleasure.